Awesome.
Hey,
Hey,
there he
look
is.
at that Christmas tree,
I
man.
know, being festive.
That is awesome. That's a beautiful Christmas tree. I love the ornaments there you
It's
got.
real too, I promise. Here.
You didn't pay. Are you sure with the Oregon woods you didn't did you go out there in the Oregon woods and cut one down?
No, we're fake. We've always been environment friendly with the reusable, reduce, reuse, recycle. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm still basking in all of these books you gave me. I said it pays to have friends in high places. Look at this. My library, my book library has expanded. I thought I had a lot of books coming out of seminary,
I trade
and
I trade in that commerce, so happy to do it.
look at this one, man.
Yes.
Reading Philippians. This is it, Dr. Nijay Gupta. So I'm
It's not
getting.
meant to be an advertisement,
I
Colby.
Hey, this is good though. This is good. I've been reading this. This has been really good.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Well, we're here to talk about Bonhoeffer, and I know
yeah,
folks
dude.
are tuning in and are interested in the movie. I was the one that invited Colby, pastor, friend, basketball player Colby Maier, to have this conversation. We haven't known each other that long. It's been months,
Right,
not years,
right.
but we
Yeah.
just connected really fast. We have a lot of the same interests. We know a lot of the same folks, and so it wasn't long before we discovered we're both Bonhoeffer fans, and we both wanted to see the movie. And so we got together a week or so ago, and it was late. It was like
Hmm.
9 p.m. It was the only showing in kind of my area,
That's
and
right.
my wife joined us, as well as somewhat unexpectedly my son, who is 15 going on 16. So as we chat about the movie, I was really interested in what my son thought and his experiences with it. But for those that are following along, there's a new movie out on Bonhoeffer. People have said it's connected to Eric Metaxas. It's actually not. He's maybe spoken about it and said it's a good
Yeah,
movie,
that's right.
but it's an independent film. And actually, the guy who produced it is kind of famous. He's done the movie Sully. Did you know that?
Yeah. I had a friend who worked with Angel Studios on a different project, and yeah, it's a phenomenal studio that produced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. But let's just, real quick, let's start off a little bit light, Colby, and just tell me, like, what's your first introduction to Bonhoeffer as, kind of in your student years, or maybe, in your pastoral ministry? Give me a quick take on how you got introduced to Bonhoeffer.
Yeah, well, I think it was first I was listening to a sermon. I think it was probably in Canada, in British Columbia. I can't remember what church it was at, but a pastor quoted Bonhoeffer's climactic statement: "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil.
Yeah.
God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." And that kind of captivated me right there. I also had a grandfather who fought in the Second World War,
Wow.
and not on this side of the equation. He fought under the German side. He was a Nazi soldier,
Wow.
and so yeah. And so he was. I mean, I grew up listening to stories from him about uh, life and death scenarios. Fight or die, so to speak, and just the kind of the treatment that the German soldiers received from their own kind. It was crazy. It was absolutely stunning. And so I think what was interesting was that captivated me, and then also my grandfather's lineage and history, and my ancestry going back to Germany. That kind of interested me. And Bonhoeffer was a German theologian, Lutheran pastor, and so that right away I kind of started to explore and expand. Started to explore his writings, particularly The Cost of Discipleship, which I got again right here with me.
Yeah.
Beautiful book. Love this book, Cost of Discipleship.
Yeah.
Probably one of his what does it look like to follow Jesus? What is the cheap grace versus costly grace? So I started reading his stuff, and I was just blown away. I was like, man, this is a guy who he really had convictions, and he
Yeah.
stood by them and wrote volumes on Christian ethics and so on and so forth. And so for him to be taking the position that he did, I mean, it was inspiring. It was inspiring. So I mean, I've watched previous films from him before, and I was moved, but this one was, a little bit more modernized. It was a little bit different. So I really appreciated it.
Yeah, I kind of discovered Bonhoeffer in kind of around 2010. I was teaching undergraduate students in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
I was really looking for something for my students to read, freshmen, 18-year-olds, and they were kind of sick of Christian hypocrisy, Christian,
Mm.
you know, they can talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And they're asking questions about whether Christianity is relevant to the modern era of life with science and technology and
Yep.
morality. And I remember reading this little book called Dietrich Bonhoeffer for Armchair Theologians, which is like a little tiny
Mm.
biography.
I think yeah. I think I've read that.
It
Yeah,
has
yeah.
cartoon pictures. I gave it to my son. He's reading it now. And it just blew me away, just hearing about his life, hearing his convictions. But he's a deep thinker, but he's full of integrity
Mm.
and wants to do the right thing, you know, kind of wants to speak to the moment, willing to put his life on the line, willing to speak truth to power. Also, kind of the symbol of the cross has always been meaningful to me. And I used
Hmm.
to have a saying that I'd say with my friend who passed away, but he was a Bonhoeffer scholar. It's actually a saying from Bonhoeffer: "Only the suffering God can help."
Mm.
And
Mm.
really, Bonhoeffer
Wow.
really broadcasts and promotes the incarnation. You know, a lot of Christians love the resurrection, love the empowerment. Bonhoeffer was like, what we need to know about God really is said in the incarnation. I mean, the cross is important, but the incarnation is God with us.
Yes.
Uh, really inspired me.
Well, that's a Karl Barthian statement. God with us, Emmanuel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the movie. Quick
Yeah.
take. So I'm going to start with
Yeah.
quick take, then we're going to get into critique because we could,
Yeah.
you know, you and I, you know, if you've studied some Bonhoeffer, you're going to have opinions. But let's just do. You're watching the movie. I know that you had like a panoply of snacks.
I just want to say, man, I walked in the theater. I was the most disappointing element to me was that the slushy machine was
Those
broken, man. That was like,
slushy.
that was, I couldn't believe it, man. So no, that was, yeah, yeah. But we
So,
made our way through that.
what's your quick take? Quick reaction?
Yeah,
It was emotional. It was, you know, powerful. We were together. But what's your quick take?
I think my quick take was the movie was a little bit slow moving
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
and the old Bonhoeffer films were a little bit quicker, so that was a bit of an adjustment too. But also, I think another thing that I was kind of fascinated by was the way that they kind of portrayed Bonhoeffer as when he moved from Germany to America, and how he kind of takes on the trappings of your everyday American
Yeah.
citizen,
Yeah.
and he begins to. I think there was one moment where he walks into a jazz bar, and Bonhoeffer, comes from a very affluent family, is trained in classical music, plays the piano, is an amazing pianist, and he gets invited to step up in this
Yeah.
jazz bar, and they're playing jazz music, obviously, and he's playing the piano, and he starts to
Yeah.
play classical music on the piano, and all of a sudden the tune swaps, and he accommodates and adjusts, and I think that was really cool because we think of Bonhoeffer, I think sometimes as this guy that you know is quite removed from American culture, but he was very integrated in a lot of regards into American culture. And so to kind of see them portray him as taking on the trappings of your everyday American citizen, I thought that was unique and interesting. And also, I think the one big thing that me and you kind of discussed was, and this is the way Bonhoeffer has been consistently portrayed as, is that he was a part of this assassination attempt, and his involvement in the assassination attempt has been somewhat
Yeah.
murky, and I think there's a lot of misconception to that. So that was interesting, and maybe you can expand on that too as well
Yeah.
later.
We'll get into that. My quick reaction
Yeah, yeah,
was, you know, I'm watching the movie really through the lens of my son who's sitting with us,
yeah.
and just what I want him to fall in love with Bonhoeffer's story the way I did. And I think the movie captures a lot of that.
Hmm.
First of all, you know, tell me what you think. There's a lot of choices you can make with a film like this. They actually framed it with his imprisonment. So they start with they start with his childhood, but the first major scene of his adulthood is imprisonment, and then they flash back to earlier scenes, but they also
Yes, yeah.
imprisonment. And he was in prison in a couple different places. He was in Tegel, which is low security, so to speak, and then
Hmm.
goes into sort of the darker period of Flossenburg, where he's actually, you know, executed. So they spend most of the time in his last days before
Hmm.
execution. I thought it was a really fascinating choice. It immediately raises the stakes. It's not this sort of, you know, like you said, it is slow moving, but
Hmm.
by framing it with the imprisonment, I think immediately brings us into the gravity of the situation. I thought that was
Yeah.
cool. A couple other things I did like the U.S. scenes with Harlem, the Black
Mm-hmm.
church, gospel
Mm-hmm.
music.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's something interesting. Anyone that's read anything about Bonhoeffer knows his close friendship with his student and friend Eberhard Bethge. I've always seen interviews and pictures of Bethge as an older man, like 50s or 60s, and they portray him realistically as a very young person, maybe even a teenager, when he is in those years with Dietrich. That was crazy because I had never pictured him as a young person. It's kind of like Mary, the mother of Jesus. We don't think about her in different ages. She's always just the Virgin Mary of the Assumption or
Yep.
something. I seeing those that the young age group of those students that were connected to Finkenwalde, which was the seminary that he was involved with. I'll tell you one thing that really stood out to me is Bonhoeffer's relationship with Bishop
Yeah.
Bell. So Bishop Bell,
Yeah.
American bishop, and he and what they didn't, I don't know if they showed this, but he actually had a ministry placement. Bonhoeffer did in England. I don't. Was that really? Do you think that was in the film?
I don't think that was portrayed quite obviously. Yeah, I don't think that was in
Yeah,
the
but
film. Yeah.
I thought this was interesting because a lot of that is
He
true.
went there. He went there very briefly, and
Yeah,
that was
he
to
did.
yeah
Yeah,
as a spy.
but one thing they didn't portray in the film, they did a little bit, but not enough, was he was a globetrotter. I mean, he traveled. He lived in Spain for a
Mm-hmm.
while, in Barcelona. He traveled for ecumenical meetings in Switzerland and other places. He was all over the place. So for those that are just tuning in, this is about the new Bonhoeffer film with Angel Studios. You can check that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some of the concerns. So I have some notes here,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have major concerns, but I have a lot of minor things. Let's talk about the major concerns. There's Colby, is the word assassin in the title of the movie? I can't remember.
Yeah, it is. It's in the actual poster.
Subtitle. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah.
actually think that is misleading. So if I were to explain what I think is true, and maybe you know better, you could tell me. But if I is he became part of Abwehr, which is the German military intelligence, and he was kind of brought in by a friend. It gave him a couple things. It gave him a chance to get away from the heat because he would be seen as a pro-German,
Mm-hmm.
person. It allowed him to travel freely. He kind of had, a special pass to travel freely, and allowed him to communicate with the Allies because he would seem to be doing German intelligence when he's actually doing communication with the Allies. Now he was involved in something called Operation 7, which is a mission to free a number of Jews into Switzerland, which was portrayed in the movie, which is great. I'm glad they did that
Mm-hmm.
because that was, and I don't know if you know this, that was actually the reason he was arrested originally.
Right. So it was part of his overarching involvement in the resistance movement
Yes.
was
And,
why he was ultimately tried
yeah.
for treason, right?
Now there was a scene in the movie where, and I thought this may be the most outlandish thing
Uh,
in the movie, where
uh,
he's asking England for a bomb. Do you remember that?
wait, what? I don't know if I. When was that?
He was, I think, pressuring Bishop Bell to ask England to supply the resistance with a bomb because the first attempt failed.
Okay, okay,
And I
okay.
think that Bonhoeffer wouldn't have been in any of those.
Right, right.
His goal was really communication and allied support. One thing I did like from the movie was they pointed out that uh, Bonhoeffer was used as an example in England of Germans who were anti-Hitler,
Yeah,
and therefore the Allies shouldn't just bomb everywhere because they may
right.
hit resistance communities or resistance leaders. I thought that was pretty cool. So tell me, what were some of your favorite parts of the movie?
I mean, number one, I think at the end there when he's in the he's been tried, he's convicted or whatever like that, and he's going out to the
Yeah,
gallows, and there's a moment where he has an opportunity to actually flee, and and I don't know how much that is in the movie versus how much is actually yeah, 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 but he has an opportunity to kind of flee, and I think the way it portrays Bonhoeffer, where he's putting others above and beyond himself in that moment, where he could get away, but they're going to kill his family. He could get away, but the people that are with him, and he puts, you know, in a very altruistic way, he's putting people above him. And I think that is, you know, that is something that I took away, because I think, number one, to be able to stand and do what he did and take the stand that he did, it takes a lot of conviction. It takes a lot of you know, determination. Like, you're not going to move, you're not budging, and come hell or high water, we're going to go, we're going to see it through. And I think he did that right until the very end, you know, where he had an opportunity to recant or whatever it was, but he didn't. He's like, man, I'm going to go through with it, and I'm not moving, and I'm not backing down from this fight. And I think, you know, he was integral to the very end, and he held his principles to the very end. And you know, when I think of Bonhoeffer and the narrative of the story, I think of someone who had integrity and who was willing to pay the costs. And I think, I mean, that's his book, right? The cost of discipleship. I mean, there's a price to pay to follow Jesus of Nazareth, and it's not easy, but it's always worth it in the long run. And I think he did that to the very end. I think that inspired me. That was an aspect of the movie I really liked.
No, I don't think most people know this, Colby. You probably know this, but the original title of his book was actually just Nachfolge, which means discipleship. And only after his death and his sacrifice did they rename the book The Cost of Discipleship.
Okay.
So if you go to the authorized versions, you know, the ones that scholars produce, it's just called Discipleship, because that's the actual title of the book, Nachfolge.
Oh.
But I actually
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Titled it after they, you know, what most people don't know is Bonhoeffer wasn't understood by his own people in his own time. They thought he was weird and confusing, and only really because of the British and Western popularity of Bonhoeffer and his story through the eyes of Bell and others did they actually start to kind of revere him as a martyr and hero.
Yeah.
I want to mention one thing I thought was interesting, and I want to mention some things that weren't in the film. He goes to the U.S. twice. He goes first to study at Union Seminary, which is kind of fun. Union is, you know, super legendary in the seminary academic world. And for those who don't know, actually, Cornell West has the Bonhoeffer Chair of preaching.
That's crazy to me. That is so cool.
Crazy, right?
Like, that is really cool.
Yeah. And they did depict him at Union, which is cool. And then he goes back to Germany, and then he goes again to the U.S. And they do a good job contextualizing that his family and friends were afraid that he would be either conscripted into war or found out as a resistance member. And so he goes to the U.S. again to kind of get away, go on a preaching tour. And there's an interesting scene where he's with some of the Harlem leadership, and they convince him to go back. That's not realistic. Actually, it is Karl Barth. We've talked about this. Karl Barth, this theologian, is actually, I think, the one that convinced him to go back. Barth wrote a very sharp-tongued letter to Bonhoeffer saying, you have to come back, or you'll just, you can't come back and celebrate the victory if you weren't a part of the resistance.
Yeah.
This is actually a quote from Barth. Think of only one thing, that you are German, that the house of your church is on fire, and that you know enough to be able to help, and that you must return to your post by the next ship.
Wow.
Pretty serious stuff. And he did.
Yeah.
Very, very short time in the U.S. and went straight away. One thing they depicted in the movie, Colby, is just how filthy rich he was. His parents were loaded.
Yeah. They show the affluent nature. I mean, his father, if I'm not mistaken, was a famous psychiatrist. In Germany, and he had a lot of influence, you know, both in the political scene, but you know, he's very well connected. And I don't know if that's attributed to some of the fact that Bonhoeffer was able to get in and out the way he was. I mean that's probably some of it, right?
Reputation, network, family network, that sort of thing. Well, we're going to wrap up here, but I want to mention a few more things that weren't in the movie, and then I want your kind of final words, call to action. Do you recommend the movie? Thumbs up? How many stars? That sort of thing. You think that were left out of the movie? Bonhoeffer was engaged to a woman named Maria von Wedemeyer, who was 18 years old compared to his 37 years old, by the way.
Oh, that's quite a gap.
He wrote letters to her. They agreed to get married. Bonhoeffer was an accomplished theologian. He actually taught at the University of Bonn. They weren't able to depict that. But sometimes the way he talks or the way he preaches in the movie doesn't come across as learned as he actually is. And I'm sad about that.
Theologian aspect wasn't as quite there.
And his writings, I mean, ethics, discipleship, life together, his dissertation, that sort of thing. Some powerful stuff they left out. Okay, if I were to drop one scene into the movie, just a 2-minute scene,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
just a 2-minute scene. So if you're the producer and you're listening, it would be that Bonhoeffer actually wanted to study with Gandhi. He actually reached out to Gandhi.
Are you
Yeah, he
serious?
actually reached out to Gandhi and said, I am a fellow fan of the Sermon on the Mount. You are
Uh-huh.
a fellow fan of the Sermon on the Mount. I would like to come and study with you. He sent a letter to Gandhi. Gandhi actually sent a letter back saying, yes, please come study with me. I want to learn from you as
No
well. And
way.
Bonhoeffer had to turn it down because of what was going on in Germany. So I would have loved
Wow.
a shade of that story of either him writing a letter to Gandhi or Gandhi returning it, whatever. Okay, last quick take. This is going to be a spoiler a little bit for people watching. I didn't know whether or not they depict Hitler. They might have gone the way of like the movie Air, like Jordan, where they
Mm-hmm.
don't show Jordan because he's too big of a figure. Like, who do you?
Mm-hmm.
I I'm double-minded. I'm probably a no vote on showing Hitler. He's too big of a figure to put that on any actor. What's your take?
Yeah,
Show
yeah.
Hitler or don't show Hitler?
Man, I think no, don't show them because I mean, yeah, I just felt like it kind of reduced, it lessened the impact of it. And
No.
it's hard to, yeah, to find someone who's the embodiment of malevolence like that in such a, you just can't do it. Who are you going to put that on? And I didn't like that part. I thought that was odd. I thought
Yeah.
it was really odd and it just didn't feel good.
I appreciate they
Um,
add the assassination plot, but yeah, I didn't like that. Okay, last words. What's your take to folks? Yay, nay, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I hope, even though that some of the things we discussed, I think they were missing or lacking, or it's hard to put it all in a film, right? I mean, his life work and I mean, his work as a theologian, as a pastor, his involvement in the confessing church and all that. I think it's hard to put it, encapsulate it all in a film. And I think they did. They tried to do the best they could. They jumped back and forth between his early childhood life and later on, and I think that was a creative way to do it. But it's hard to capture the man in a single film. And I hope that even though it did miss parts, I hope that when people go watch it, and I do recommend people watching it, I do think it's worth seeing, that I hope it inspires people to actually go ahead and pick up The Cost of Discipleship, or go pick up, something on Christian ethics by him, and just go explore and study his work and see what you come across. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how impactful his writings are. Like, they truly have translated from man, I can't believe it, from 70, 80 years ago, and now it's still living, and his legacy is still moving, and his work and writing still have a massive impact on Christian ethics and so on and so forth. So I really hope it inspires people to go ahead and read his work, if nothing less. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not that big of like a movie critic where I'd like poo-poo, especially reels. If I'm a filmmaker, like I want people to know I'm not gonna be able to capture everything. I'm not gonna get everybody's favorite scene.
Yeah.
It's just whether it is faithful to the essence of the person. I think so. In general, it's going to be faithful to the essence of the person. It would be terrible if there was kind of a political skew to it that would favor, an
Hmm.
American political candidate or anything like that. There was a review written by a Bonhoeffer scholar named Reggie Williams. So people out there listening, you can type Reggie Williams and find his review, African American scholar, Bonhoeffer expert. And he basically says what you just said, that he doesn't like some of the inaccuracies in the film, but he understands it's an artistic portrayal.
Hmm.
He says after you've watched it, watch a documentary, pick up
Yep.
his book. So you've recommended discipleship. I want to recommend a good biography. I've mentioned Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Armchair Theologians. My favorite writing of Bonhoeffer's is actually his letters and papers from prison. So they collect
Mm.
his handwritten letters to his friends, mostly Eberhard Bethke, but others.
Where can people find those? Are they easily accessible
If
online?
you go to Amazon, you type letters and papers from prison, they're collected into one volume. And I tell
Okay.
you what, if you learn a little bit about his life, see the movie, maybe read a short biography, and you read that book, it will change your Christian life.
Yeah.
You will have a whole new appreciation for a faith well lived to the death. Uh,
Hmm.
so I'm
Hmm.
hugely inspired. So I'm with you, Colby. Watch the movie. Don't assume it's all, frame by frame accurate, but if it inspires people like my son, I'm pointing to his room, like my son to go, you know, read something, which he is, and learn more about, I think, a period of German history that strangely feels familiar. I know people don't like referring to the time now as a Bonhoeffer moment.
Hmm.
Double-minded. I'm okay with that because I do think we're in sort of a crossroads in the U.S. Where we're creating the conditions that can lead to a Fuhrer
Yep. Yep.
another time. But I think this is a timely movie, given what's going on in America, and I think Bonhoeffer is a perennially important figure. So
Yeah.
that's the call. Any last words, Colby? Otherwise, we're going to sign off.
No, I think definitely go see it, read his stuff, and yeah, I think we need to grapple more with this idea, especially in terms of the modern age and some of the horrors and atrocities that committed in the modern age. I think we need to grapple more with our history because if we don't understand, how are we going to learn from it? How are we going to grow from it? And I think there's more and more consensus and research saying that what happened 70, 80 years ago in the new generation is being forgotten. It's being unnoted in education systems and whatnot and so on and so forth. And I think there needs to be more emphasis and focus on that because we need to continue to remember and ultimately grow from these things and not forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he portrays that Bonhoeffer himself went through an evolution. He didn't start out in resistance.
Hmm.
You know, so anything you can do to learn, anything you can do
Yeah.
to educate on history on Bonhoeffer would be helpful. All right. Thanks, everybody,
Cool.
for joining.
All
Talk
right.
to you later, Cole.
See you, Nijay.